Hey everyone, are you ready for a deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're exploring the Underground Railroad, and I gotta say,
Yeah,
the stories from this historical podcast we're using as source material are incredible.
I bet.
It's a real look into this secret network
Yeah,
and all the people who made it work.
absolutely.
It's fascinating stuff. We're gonna be talking about people like Harriet Tubman,
Oh, yeah.
the woman who risked her life over and over
Mm-hmm.
to lead folks to freedom.
Mm-hmm.
We'll also be covering events like the Jerry Rescue,
Okay,
which showed just how much resistance there was to that Fugitive Slave Act.
for sure.
Have you ever thought about
I have.
how regular people managed to challenge such a powerful system?
Well, that's what's so amazing about the Underground Railroad. It wasn't a real railroad,
Right.
it was a network, routes, and safe houses
Right.
that enslaved African Americans used to escape to freedom.
Wow.
You had conductors leading people along these routes, getting them food and shelter, giving them guidance, all in secret.
That's like a real-life spy network.
It really is, except the stakes were so much higher.
Yeah, absolutely. To really get the impact of the Underground Railroad, we need to go back,
Back in time.
way back to before the Civil War,
Uh,
when slavery was just a part of life in the South.
mhm.
So let's set the scene.
Mhm.
Decades before the Civil War, slavery was legal in the southern states.
Sure was.
Even then, people risked everything to escape to the North.
Right.
And then things got even more complicated with the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850.
Oh, yeah, that act made it a federal crime to help runaway slaves.
Wow.
And it made citizens help catch them.
Really?
Imagine living in a free state
Yeah.
and being forced to help return someone to slavery.
That's crazy.
Created a real moral problem,
Yeah.
and it made escaping even more dangerous.
I can't even imagine the fear those escaping must have felt.
Yeah,
Reaching a free state wasn't even a guarantee of safety.
right. It was a constant threat hanging over their heads.
Absolutely. So how did this affect the Underground Railroad movement?
Well, it really made things urgent.
Makes sense.
Before, it was about helping people escape one by one.
Yeah.
But now it felt like a fight against an unfair system.
That's powerful. Speaking of brave people, we've got to talk about Harriet Tubman.
Oh, absolutely.
She's like this symbol of the Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
The source material really digs into her early life.
Does it?
It's a harsh reminder of how brutal slavery was.
Well, Harriet Tubman, whose real name was Araminta Ross,
Araminta Ross.
went through so much as a child.
Oh, wow.
Hired out to different slave owners, always being moved, facing all sorts of abuse.
It's hard to even think about.
And as a teenager, she was hit in the head with a weight.
Oh, gosh.
It caused her lifelong health problems.
It's unbelievable that someone who suffered so much could become such a symbol of hope for others.
That's what makes her story so powerful. It shows how strong the human spirit can be.
You're right.
In 1849, she was afraid of being sold away from her family,
Yeah.
so she made the incredibly brave decision to escape to freedom herself.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So she just walked into the unknown, relying on the kindness of people she didn't even know.
It's hard to know what she was thinking,
I bet.
but she had incredible courage and determination.
Sure.
Imagine traveling at night,
Yeah.
using the stars to guide you,
Wow.
always afraid of being caught. It's truly remarkable.
It really puts things in perspective.
Yeah,
She made it to Philadelphia, tasted freedom for the first time.
right.
But a story doesn't end there.
Oh, no, not at all. It was just the beginning. She couldn't stand the thought of her family still being enslaved
I can't imagine.
while she was free.
Oh, wow.
So she went back again and again,
Really?
risking her life to lead others to freedom.
No way.
Oh, yeah,
I know she got the nickname Moses because she led so many people out of slavery.
that's right.
What made her so good at it, other than her bravery, I mean?
She was resourceful and smart, used disguises.
Like what?
Often she'd dress as an old woman to avoid suspicion.
Oh, clever.
At the time, people didn't pay much attention to old women.
Yeah, that makes sense.
They weren't seen as a threat.
Wow, she was playing a high-stakes game, always thinking steps ahead.
She really was.
I can see why she's considered a legend.
Oh, absolutely. And as she became more well-known, more people wanted her help.
So let's talk about some of the other resistance happening at the time. How did the Underground Railroad impact the growing abolitionist movement?
Okay, so one of the earliest examples is the Shadrach Minkins rescue in Boston in 1851.
Ooh, I've heard of this.
Minkins was a runaway slave from Virginia.
Yeah.
He got captured, but the abolitionists in Boston weren't having it.
What do you mean?
They stormed the courthouse and took him back.
That must have been incredible to see.
It was bold, and it showed the power of people coming together. None of the rescuers were convicted.
Wow.
Really shows how attitudes were changing in the North.
amazing how one event could fuel a whole movement. What happened next?
Well, the resistance wasn't just in big cities like Boston.
Huh.
There was the Christiana resistance in Pennsylvania, a rural area near the Maryland border.
Okay.
That became a hub for underground railroad activity.
I'm guessing things got a bit messy there.
You could say that. A former slave named William Parker had set up a bunch of safe houses in Christiana.
Yeah.
Well, this caught the attention of some slave catchers.
I bet it did.
A slave owner named Edward Gorsuch
Ed Worsich?
showed up with a posse demanding his runaway slaves back.
Oh, no.
But Parker and his community were ready for them.
I bet they were.
Parker was a great organizer.
Hmm.
He had prepared for a confrontation like this.
Smart.
When Gorsuch and his men arrived, Parker's vigilance committee was armed and waiting.
Wow.
They responded to Eliza Parker's horn signal.
Eliza Parker, was she related to William?
Yes, she was his wife, and she played a crucial role in rallying everyone to protect the fugitive slaves.
That's amazing. What happened next?
Well, the standoff led to Gorsuch's death,
Oh, my gosh.
and it sent shockwaves across the whole country.
Talk about standing up for what you believe in. It wasn't just about hiding anymore. They were fighting back.
Absolutely. The Christiana resistance showed the Underground Railroad was more than just a secret network. It was a movement that inspired people to take action, even if it meant violence.
So powerful.
This event really scared the South
Understandable.
and made the divide between North and South even bigger.
It sounds like things were about to explode. But before we get to that, tell me more about Harriet Tubman's journey. What happened next?
Well, it's kind of sad, actually.
What is?
Tubman tries to rescue her husband,
Okay.
but he'd stayed in Maryland, and he
Right.
had gotten remarried.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine coming all that way and facing that?
It's heartbreaking.
It really shows how tough the choices were back then, the
Oh, definitely.
sacrifices people made,
Yeah.
the emotional toll of fighting for freedom.
It must have been so hard.
But Tubman, she didn't let this stop her.
I wouldn't expect her to.
Kept going on missions even further south, leading more people to safety.
Wow.
There's this story that really shows her determination.
What happened?
She was leading this group of fugitives,
Yeah.
and one guy, he got scared,
Makes sense.
started talking about turning back.
Oh, no.
Tubman knew how dangerous that was for
Yeah.
everyone.
Right.
So she pulls out a pistol
What?
and she threatens him.
Seriously?
She said, "You'll be free or die."
She was serious.
Oh, absolutely.
That's intense.
It was life or death out there.
Definitely.
And, as the Underground Railroad kept growing, there was this new force that came along
What was that?
that really changed the anti-slavery movement. You ever heard of the book Uncle Tom's Cabin?
Of course. It's a classic, but I'll be honest, I haven't actually read it.
Right.
What made it so impactful?
The author, Harriet Beecher Stowe,
Okay.
she captured the horrors of slavery in a way that people really connected with. Before that, a lot of the writing against slavery was all about laws and politics.
I can see that.
But Stowe, she made it personal.
Ah, I see.
Vivid characters, emotional stories.
Yeah.
She showed people the human suffering.
It was like giving a voice to those who didn't have one.
Exactly. And it had a huge impact. It was published in 1852,
Okay.
and boom, instant bestseller.
Wow.
Hundreds of thousands of copies sold.
No way.
Oh, yeah.
It must have really changed how people thought about slavery.
It really did.
I can only imagine how that added to the debate.
Absolutely, it did.
Were there any other big events happening around then that made things even worse?
Yes,
Huh.
there was. The Anthony Burns case in Boston.
Okay.
This was in 1854.
Yeah.
Burns, he was a runaway slave.
Right.
He got arrested, and it caused massive protests.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Abolitionists tried to rescue him.
Did it work?
It didn't, unfortunately.
Oh, no.
They had to bring in federal troops to send him back to slavery in Virginia.
It sounds like the city was ready to riot.
It was a turning point for many Northerners.
In what way?
They saw the Fugitive Slave Act in action,
Right.
It was unsettling to see federal troops used to force someone back into slavery.
I could see that.
A lot of states, including Massachusetts, passed what they called personal liberty laws.
What are those?
Those were basically ways for states to push back against the federal government.
So they were directly against the Fugitive Slave Act.
Exactly. They made it a lot harder for slave owners to get their runaway slaves back.
Clever.
Created a bunch of legal obstacles.
So it was the North and the South drawing their battle lines.
Yep, that's a good way to put it.
Oh.
And this leads us to the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854.
Okay.
This just poured fuel on the fire of the slavery debate.
How so?
We got to go back to the Missouri Compromise of 1820.
Okay.
This said no slavery north of the 36° 30 over parallel.
So it's like a temporary fix,
Right.
just to keep things calm.
Exactly. But then this Kansas-Nebraska Act comes along,
Right.
and it basically said, let the settlers decide if they want slavery or not.
Oh, no.
Totally overturned the Missouri Compromise, you see. Yeah.
Suddenly, both sides are rushing to Kansas.
Pro-slavery and anti-slavery.
Yep. And it led to a ton of violence.
Bleeding Kansas, really.
That's it. It was like a preview of the Civil War.
Yeah.
Both sides fighting for control.
So all this violence in Kansas
Yes.
and the Underground Railroad still going strong made the South pretty paranoid, huh?
Oh, yeah.
They must have felt like the North was out to get them.
They definitely did.
Was anyone trying to calm things down at that point, or was it too late?
There were some folks trying to find peaceful solutions,
Okay,
but things were getting out of control.
I bet.
And then, in the middle of all this, comes this guy, John Brown,
Ah, John Brown.
radical abolitionist.
Wasn't he the one who raided Harper's Ferry?
That's him. To get him, we need to go back to Bleeding Kansas.
Right.
Brown, he was all about violent action against slavery.
He didn't mess around.
Not at all. He saw the brutality in Kansas firsthand.
Makes sense.
And he was convinced that the only way to end slavery was through armed revolt. Wow. So he was a man of action, not words.
Exactly. His big plan was to seize the federal arsenal at Harper's Ferry, Virginia,
Bold move.
arm the enslaved people,
For
and
sure.
start a massive slave uprising.
That's a pretty ambitious plan. Did he really think he could pull it off?
Maybe not, but it shows how desperate some abolitionists were getting.
Yeah.
They felt peaceful methods weren't working.
Right.
They needed to do something drastic.
So what happened at Harper's Ferry?
Well, it happened in 1859,
Okay.
and it was a failure.
Oh,
Brown and his men, they got captured,
right.
and he was executed later.
Wow.
But even though the raid failed, it really shook things up.
How
It made the South even more suspicious of the North.
Yeah.
Really deepened the divide between the two sides.
It's like things were already on edge, and this just pushed them over the brink.
Exactly. And with that, the stage was set for the Civil War.
Wow. So what happened to the Underground Railroad during the war?
Well, even with the war raging on,
Yeah,
the fight for freedom didn't stop.
I can imagine.
Things changed, though.
In what way?
Our source material tells this story about 3 enslaved men
Okay.
escaping from a Confederate camp in Virginia,
When was this?
1861.
Right at the beginning.
They were exhausted from forced labor,
Oh, man.
but they risked everything
To do what?
to steal a boat and row across the James River
Wow.
to reach the Union lines.
That's incredible. Did they make it?
They did.
Wow.
Ended up at Fort Monroe.
Where's that?
It was commanded by Union General Benjamin Butler.
Okay.
Now, Butler, he had a problem.
What was it?
A Confederate officer wanted those men back.
Under the Fugitive Slave Act, right?
Exactly. But Butler, he saw things differently.
Well, yeah, it was war.
He did.
The old rules didn't really apply anymore, I guess.
That's right. So Butler, he declared those escaped men contraband of war.
What does that mean?
It means they were enemy property,
Ah, okay.
property that could be seized.
So he basically used the Confederates' own laws against them.
Exactly. Smart move, right?
So clever.
Yeah.
Did that change how the Union dealt with escaped slaves?
Oh, absolutely. The Lincoln administration, they were hesitant at first,
Yeah.
but they ended up supporting Butler's policy.
Wow. So escaped slaves were no longer criminals, but valuable assets.
Exactly.
It's like the Underground Railroad became official U.S. policy.
In a way, yeah.
I bet that led to a lot more escapes.
You bet it did.
Did it get even better?
Oh, yeah, it did. With the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863.
Right. It freed all the slaves in Confederate territory.
Exactly. It was a huge moment.
Changed the whole war, didn't it?
It did. Ending slavery became a main goal for the Union.
So did the Emancipation Proclamation just make the Underground Railroad disappear?
It definitely changed things.
But people still needed help, right?
Oh, absolutely. Getting to freedom was still really dangerous.
I bet.
Think of it like this. The official roads were open, but the journey was still risky.
That makes sense. What about those who were already part of the Underground Railroad?
They didn't just sit around.
What did they do?
They helped the Union in all sorts of ways.
Like what?
Frederick Douglass,
I know him.
a famous abolitionist, former slave himself,
Yeah.
he recruited black soldiers for the Union Army.
That's incredible.
They were fighting for their own freedom.
So powerful. What about others?
Levi Coffin,
What was that?
he was a Quaker, a key figure in the Underground Railroad.
Okay.
He worked hard to help escaped slaves in refugee camps.
So even with the war going on, people still helped those fleeing slavery.
Absolutely. And Harriet Tubman.
She was still going too.
Oh, yeah, she did all sorts of
That's
things.
what?
Cook, nurse, even a spy for the Union Army.
Seriously. Wow, she was amazing.
She was. Our source even talks about this daring raid she led.
Tell me about it.
On the Combahee River in South Carolina,
Okay.
she helped free over 700 slaves.
She was unstoppable. What happened to the Underground Railroad after the war ended and slavery was abolished?
Well, once the 13th Amendment was passed in 1865,
Which ended slavery everywhere.
that's right. The Underground Railroad, as we know it, came to an end.
It's amazing to think that this secret network played such a big part in ending slavery.
It really is.
It shows what can happen when people come together, no matter the risks.
Absolutely. Our source even mentions that maybe as many as 100,000 people escaped through the network.
100,000.
That's a lot of lives changed.
It's humbling to think about.
It's a testament to all those involved.
And it wasn't just about escaping.
No, it wasn't.
It was about dignity, about standing up for what's right.
Exactly.
It really makes you think about how relevant the Underground Railroad is today.
It does, doesn't it?
What can we learn from it for our lives today?
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's incredible to think that something so secretive and built on trust
Yeah.
could work so well for so long.
Makes you wonder about all those people we'll never know about.
Right.
The ones who helped, but whose names were never recorded.
The unsung heroes. It shows how powerful a collective effort can be.
Right, like all those conductors,
Yes.
station masters,
Mm-hmm.
people providing food and shelter,
Giving guidance.
all while risking their own freedom.
It's amazing.
And it wasn't just in the North, was it?
No, not at all.
I was reading that free black communities in the South were involved too.
Oh, yeah. That's important to remember.
It must have been so much more dangerous for them.
It was much more dangerous.
But they were there, providing support, guiding people to safety.
Shows how widespread the opposition to slavery was.
It wasn't just a North versus South thing, was it?
No, it went beyond that.
It was about what's right and what's wrong.
A moral battle.
Exactly. Thinking about the Underground Railroad's legacy,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways for us today? What can we learn from it?
Well, I think it shows us that we can't be complacent when it comes to justice.
Right.
The people in this movement knew that staying silent was the same as agreeing.
Powerful thought.
They challenged the system, even if it meant danger for themselves.
It's like a call to action for all of us.
It is.
To speak up against what's wrong, to do something about it.
It doesn't have to be some big heroic thing, you know?
Right.
Sometimes the little things matter most.
What do you mean?
Like those people who offered a safe place or hot meal.
Yeah.
We can do the same in our communities.
How?
Support those who are struggling.
Okay.
Fight for their rights.
I like that. Small acts of kindness can make a big difference.
Exactly. It reminds me of something Frederick Douglass said. He
Yeah.
said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress.
Powerful words.
The fight for freedom, for equality, it never really ends.
You're
It
right.
takes constant work, always pushing for what's right.
This has been an amazing look into the Underground Railroad.
It has.
It's not just history. It's a story that's still relevant today.
It reminds us that fighting for justice is everyone's responsibility.
It takes courage, compassion, and a belief that things can be better.
And I urge you to keep learning about it.
Yes.
Dive into the stories of those who fought for freedom.
And let their courage inspire us to build a better future for everyone.
That's what it's all about.